Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello there, welcome to another episode of the 1% Better podcast, one with a difference. We're in between the seasons. As I record this, I've just put the final touches to the intro show to season 3, which should come out in the next week or so. Excited to release that, and there's lots of good, hopefully useful information in there about what's coming ahead, with snippets of the first 4 episodes of the 1% Better show for season 3, so that will be coming soon. In this one, it is me being interviewed as opposed to me doing the interviewing. Last week I did a live Facebook interview with Larry G. Maguire, otherwise known as The Larb. His own podcast is called The Larb, and he's been releasing for the last number of years. I interviewed Larry on the 1% Better show last year, and he had asked to switch roles at some point in the future, and we made it happen last week. We talked about creativity was the main theme, and during the 40 or so minutes we went into a lot of different angles and directions that came up during the conversation. I talked about creativity, getting up at 5 a.m, podcast interviews that stood out, work-life balance, lots and lots of other stuff. Honestly, it was quite free-form. Larry's a really good interviewer in that he let me talk, which can be difficult, as an interviewer might know. Sometimes jumping in is what you want to do, but it's hard to hold back. But Larry did a good job, and I really enjoyed chatting with him. So I said I'd share it out on the Rob O'Donoghue channel. I'll have links to Larry's site in the notes for this episode as well. And hopefully it's something to listen to and enjoy before we get season 3 up and running in the next week or so. Just trying to finalise a date for that. But we're ready to go, and I'm really looking forward to doing it. This whole thing is an ongoing snowball, and it's getting bigger and bigger from the perspective of enjoyment, at least. And hopefully this season it'll go into broader ranges, new topics, broadening the audience will be great as well. That's down to you guys and your help sharing it out. Enjoyed the conversation I had with Larry Maguire on The Larb, and do check out his content on YouTube and on Patreon. Links again will be with the show notes. Take care, enjoy, and good luck.
The Larb Live, the experiment, you might say, taking the podcast live in 2019. And tonight I'm chatting with Rob O'Donoghue from the wonderful county of Cork, and not originally a Corkonian, if I'm correct on that.
You're very correct.
Welcome along, Rob. Rob is the presenter of the 1% Better podcast and has been chatting to some really interesting people. I thought he'd be a good guy to have a conversation with about this whole subject of creativity and performance and self-improvement, etc. So welcome along, Rob. Thanks for coming along and joining me tonight. How have you been?
I'm good. Thanks so much for the invite, Larry. Looking forward to being creative about some of these answers, right? So just seeing what comes up as we go. But yeah, doing well. And, it's a Friday evening, so it's always kind of the best part of the week almost.
You better believe it. You've some recent adjustment to make to your schedule and profile, an additional member of the household.
Yeah,
congratulations with that.
Thank you very much. New little boy. He's about 9.5 weeks old at this point, so getting adjusted and certainly understanding what everybody has been saying about the whole lack of sleep. Just I know it's probably a cliche or whatever, but definitely the first few weeks when he came home, it was like a bit of an eye opener or an eye closer or whatever way you want to look at it. Yeah. But now we're getting into a bit more of a rhythm, and as I think I said to you off air, last year one of the things I did as a kind of a self-improvement activity was get up at 5 a.m. every day for a month and see if I could get it going and get it into a habit. So It has stuck. So definitely this year so far it's been useful because I still get up at 5. He doesn't typically wake till about 6:30 or 7, so I can have like nearly 90 minutes of 3 30-minute blocks of just doing stuff that I want to do. Yeah. And I feel like, geez, I've got something done and I'm still able to spend an hour with him before I get to work. So yeah, it's it's working out so far anyway. Touch wood.
The early rising, I tried it, and I do it when I need to. But if I've no one else kind of on my mind, if I don't have to meet somebody, or I don't have an appointment, or I don't like book a session in the gym or something like that, I'll stay in bed, and I might do that 5:30 thing for a little while, but it doesn't stick. Now, I don't see that as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Not getting up early. I tend to get up early when I need to, or when I want to. But
Mm-hmm.
What have you found has been different in you applying this kind of thing to your schedule?
So I
did you do it? Because look, I regard myself as a nighttime person. I'll sit up all night.
Yeah. So there was an epiphany to me a few years ago about this, and like I wasn't always a 5:30 or 6 or whatever. It would have been 7 and just getting to work and in a bit of a rush, kind of feeling like you're behind already. And I was at home, I think it was, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe, sitting at home watching TV one night, and I realized I was watching maybe an episode of Friends that I had fucking seen about 1,000 times, and I'm like, this is just not good productivity use, not a good.
What am I doing here? Yeah.
So I said, right, if I just don't watch this episode, go to bed that little bit earlier. There's this kind of thing maybe that you're saying, oh, go to bed at 10 o'clock, that's crazy, that's outrageous, or 9 o'clock or whatever. So I started to go to bed earlier, get up earlier. I'm naturally better in the morning with just doing stuff. I tend to leave like podcast editing or brain dead stuff till 10 o'clock at night if I am staying up. Whereas if I'm trying to write something or just use the brain, I try to get up that bit earlier. So I started it, and that would have been at 6 o'clock for a year or more, and was finding I was getting stuff done. I was getting maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes of chunks of work done. But I still felt, Jesus, if I could get maybe up a bit earlier, I could even get more done. So that's when I ratcheted it back to 5. So got into the habit of doing that between 5 and 5:30 most of the time. And any earlier, I think, is kind of ludicrous. It's getting into kind of madness territory where you're probably, in the past, might even been going to bed at that stage. But so I'm kind of okay with 5. I'm not like Mark Wahlberg, who talks about getting up at 2:30 in the morning, and I saw his schedule. It's ridiculous. But what I've actually thought about recently was to kind of make it stick. I kind of planned the night before or the week before of what one thing am I going to do that morning that I really, really enjoy doing. Now, you might say going to the gym or whatever. Sometimes that's not that enjoyable. Sometimes you if that's the first thing you're going to do in the morning when you're getting up, you're thinking, Jesus, I'd rather stay in bed. Whereas for the last while, I might get up and write for 30 minutes and write on a topic or write on something that I generally don't have to move too far to do. And I know at the end of those 30 minutes, I'm actually really alive and feeling like in a flow state. So
control. I found that in the morning times when I do get up and the world is asleep, there's this sense of like harmony or something like that, that you mentioned control, that you are actually in control of your day rather than speeding out the door and killing people on the road trying to get to your office or wherever it is you're working. Yeah.
And you've accomplished something. And I think that it gives you, for me, it makes me probably a bit more relaxed about the day ahead and knowing I've done something that I want to get done rather than leaving it at night when you don't know what's going to happen in the course of the day that might throw that off and it might be more difficult. But yeah, the point of getting up where everybody else is asleep and you're the only person around and you can have your coffee and just crack into it, that's working for me anyway. So I'm sticking with it for now.
Yeah, absolutely. So your main game is the 1% Better podcast. Tell us a little bit about the concept around that, why you record it, what it is you're trying to achieve by doing it, if indeed anything in particular for yourself, other people, etc.
Yeah, no worries. So I guess I've been interested in consuming podcasts for many years now, and a few years ago I kind of said, Jesus, I love learning, and I learned so much through the episodes, through the interviews that I would listen to. Would it be a kind of a crazy idea for me to interview a few people in my kind of immediate network from a business perspective that I know, and do it and put it out there and kind of flip the mode from, consumer to producer. I was probably, getting not carried away with myself from the perspective of that you can't do it. I certainly wasn't thinking stardom and millions of downloads and all of that good stuff. It was more just that fear of like, God, if I do this and I put it out there, people are going to judge me, and there was that kind of ongoing feeling of I don't like using the imposter syndrome. Everybody uses that term now, but it's just that you're being judged, and am I good enough, sort of thing. So, it was an ongoing challenge to kind of push through that, and I said, yeah, look, the topic was around self-improvement, professional development, personal development, areas that I'm interested in myself. So instead of doing it about, I don't know, blockchain or technology that I wouldn't be that deeply interested in, and you probably lose interest a few episodes in, stick to what you know, stick to what you like to learn yourself. Yeah, and get something out of it. So kind of committed to doing 10 or so episodes. Hadn't even the 1% Better name kind of only came after a number of episodes being recorded. I hadn't released them. I was kind of toying with different ideas. The Rob of the Green thing was there from the start, and that's just kind of a play on the word, or the cliche of Rob of the Green, a bit of luck, Irish names Rob, all of that. So when the 1% idea came, I think I was chatting to somebody out one night, and I was like talking about a marginal improvements and whatnot, and it was like, even if it was just 1%, it just kind of stuck. Now looking around now, there's other 1% Better podcasts out there, and there's the 1% idea, the mindset. It's not completely innovative. I'm not claiming that I came up with the idea or anything like that, but it works, and that's kind of been the mantra, I suppose, going forward. So when I do interview people from whatever walk of life, we talk about their own background, what's made them successful, and try to get focused in on some approaches that they might use, or lessons they've learned from a massive failure, and the common themes that come up then across the different worlds that they live in is very, very interesting, because you can see certain patterns emerge. You can see what drives the people forward. It's maybe out of the 100 plus that I've done, I've released about 95 or 6, and I've about another 12 recorded. Very, very rarely would you actually talk to somebody that says, no, this all just happened by luck. I got lucky. It all just worked out. I had no plan. There's always nearly a plan. There's always an intention. There's always a focus. There's always a commitment. There's practice. All of these things that come up. So it's interesting, that you get to talk to these people, and certainly wouldn't be talking to them if I didn't have a podcast to kind of use as leverage. And yeah, it's just so much fun. And then through doing that, I got more confidence, I suppose, in myself, and started doing the odd solo episode and just talking about stuff I'm interested in, and going into a bit more detail about that as well. So, amazing journey, and the best thing I'd say I've ever done for myself, for my own growth and development, and yeah, like, keep long may it continue. I hope
this is your creative outlet, you might say.
Yeah, I'm looking at your background there, and you have paintings and brilliant drawings done. Like, when you talk of creativity, and you might be growing up in school and you're painting and stuff, Jesus, that's just the furthest thing I could ever be good at, like a matchstick men sort of creativity. That would be about the height of it. So this is, for me, seems to work. It's tapping into the stuff I'm passionate about. It's sharing conversations that are hopefully of value to me and others, meaningful, and it's through the voice, and maybe getting a bit more improving a little bit on writing as well, and getting more confidence in that. Because I guess with the writing stuff, what I struggled with early on is, am I writing? Is it aligning to a proper style or whatever? And now the more I've got into it, the more you just realize this is my style. And feedback I get from random people is like, oh, I really like the way your style of writing is. It comes across very, just not you, but just very original in that respect. And it was like, yeah, I guess so. And it just gives you that confidence just to keep going in that way,
Yeah, I can relate to the confidence thing and getting started. It was similar for me in writing, but there was something there that kind of drew me, kept drawing me in. It sounds like that's how it was for you. You know, even though you're maybe nervous or apprehensive about sticking your neck out in a way you hadn't done before and how people would react and all that kind of thing, it's almost that you're compelled to do it and explore it and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Like I've done, I don't know, many blogs at this stage. Not that many, but each one is probably a little bit better than the last from the perspective of how it's shaping up and how I'm actually getting to a point and actually, you know, there's something, a takeaway. And for a long time I was kind of writing and summarizing it at the end, and somebody pinged me last year saying, I liked what you wrote, but there was no very clear call to action, and I hadn't even a clue what a call to action was, you know. So I'm looking at structure of how to put these blog posts together a little bit more now, and it's helping. But I guess as long as it's from within and you're not putting it out there for the sake of just putting stuff out there, you look, you can see the million top 10 tips of how to do X, Y, and Z, and they're just regurgitations of anything else out there. So try to shy away from that. And I think if I hit post or whatever on something, I've put effort into it. If nobody likes it, if nobody shares it or whatever, I know I've learned something from it. And that's kind of my barometer, I suppose, for want of a better word, all the time, of just saying, right, this is important. I've learned something from it, and it'll be of value to me at some point, you know.
So it kind of leads me into one of the questions that I have. If nobody bought or applauded or congratulated what you were doing, would it still be creative to you, and would it even matter?
Yeah, like I would say, absolutely, it would. It's kind of the term of, you know, post for value rather than for likes or for feedback or comments. It sticks with me, and at this point in time, the more I've been doing it, the more value or benefits I've got in other parts of my life as a result. So for me, you know, nothing has been bought out of it. I'm not really selling anything at this stage anyway. But it's the learnings I'm picking up along the way by doing it have been very rewarding, enriching, and just creating. I think, you know, from people that know me, see me as a happier person as a result of having that outlet. You know, you do the day job. You know, there's certain creativity in most people's work, and maybe more in some than others. But having this to kind of throw yourself into in the morning or in the evening or at the weekends or whatever, it's cathartic. It's just kind of stress relieving, and it's a good habit. You know, it's a
feels good. There's no better reason to do it than it feels good. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I heard. I was listening to a podcast last week with Stephen Fry, you know, Stephen Fry, the English guy, and he was on Sam Harris or whatever, and he was saying, like, he's an average actor, he's average at lots of things, but he just writes because he just absolutely loves the little bit of a journey you go on when you're sitting down to say, right, I want to write about authenticity and try to figure out what that means and polish up something at the end. And it could take a few weeks, and you could go over and back, and it's a bit of a toil or whatever, but if you can kind of say, yeah, Jesus, actually that was enjoyable, and for those 20 minutes of there, whatever, you're kind of lost in it. And whatever that expression of creativity is for whomever, you know, it can be anything. I think that's something you should be kind of feeding on a regular basis, because it just helps with all the other stuff, I suppose, going on.
Yeah, it's like that, those short or long periods, well, the longer the better, I think, those periods in your work where you're completely engrossed and everything else kind of disappears. It's almost like you disappear, and it's like you're just in the work. It's not easy, like you said, but there is this kind of process of something being made. It's pretty cool when you come out of it and have a look at it. That, oh, look what I just did, or look what I was just involved in. It's pretty cool that way.
Yeah, and what I would say to people that are doing it or kind of trying stuff, like, there's different, I suppose, it works differently for different people. That sometimes people might want to get to that state, they may need an hour or 90 minutes or longer to really dive deep in it, whereas others might be able to dip in for 20 minutes and dip out, and others might need a full day or whatever. So it's probably not to just give up after X amount of time because it's not catching for them. So it's kind of having I think creativity, going back to the question as well, is that it's about coming up with ideas, getting lost in it, but having a bit of structure around it as well. Sometimes, I don't know if you heard of the Pomodoro technique. You might have heard of that. It's kind of it's 25 minutes is basically what they say. You kind of I set a timer sometimes on Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever, and I hit start, and for those 25 minutes I'm focused on this one thing, and I'm dived into it. Now it could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour.
Yeah.
So you're kind of putting a bit of structure around it. You're putting a bit of boundaries and rules to kind of focus.
Yeah.
But then throw yourself into it. Sometimes if you say, I have the whole day now and I'm going to just be creative for you can just be all over the place and not have an output.
Absolutely,
again, you know. So
yeah.
It's important, I think. Yeah.
That's why kind of deadlines work, because it does focus your attention into actually getting the stuff done. And a lot of creative people might say, you know what, I just kind of go with the flow of it, and that's fine. But if you really want to get some quality work done, there's got to be a boundary within what you're doing in order to kind of corral you a little bit, corral your attention and your focus into getting that piece of work done.
Yeah. So my day job is around project management, and that's the kind of the fundamentals of timelines, deadlines, tasks, and get it done by X amount, by certain dates. So in a weird way, that kind of structure has absolutely helped me with the podcast stuff and getting these type of things done. So if I said I'm going to release every Friday, I'll pretty much stick to it, because that other part of my brain is kind of talking to me saying this is committed to. So it's a dichotomy, but it seems to work, and it keeps me on track, getting things done. So I didn't realize, 10 years ago or whatever, when I was getting into that PM world, that those skills are very much life skills that are very beneficial, and no matter what you do, you have the focus of, is there a plan, is there an end goal, and what is the value of doing it. So it's kind of tying them together nicely.
Out of the people you've interviewed to date, who do you think, maybe two or three, that have been the biggest influence on how you think in terms of what they've achieved, maybe the process that they've gone through? Who do you think? Yeah,
like I've been asked it a few times, and the first person that'll come up, just because he was actually on Joe Rogan's podcast this week, and he was on mine 2 years ago. So that's the first overlap guest I think I have with Joe Rogan.
Okay, right.
And this guy is Colin O'Brady. He's a kind of an adventure explorer. He's just after being the first person ever to walk across Antarctica. It took him 54 days, carrying a sleigh of 300 pounds. He's a slight build guy, but he's a beast from the resilience perspective. The same guy was nearly an Olympic swimmer, and then he got real bad burns on a holiday, and took him a year to kind of recover, and then he went and won a triathlon, and then he started doing Ironman. He is just phenomenal focus, resilience, and then he climbed all the top 7 peaks in the world and the North and South Pole in the shortest time ever. So he's multiple world records, and when I interviewed him, I knew his backstory a little bit, and it was just a really interesting conversation. And some of the things that stood out was, focus, meditation, and he does long, sometimes 10-day retreats, and that helps him when he's in these very challenging environments to kind of just push through. And he talked a lot about that on the Joe Rogan podcast there during the week as well, about those 54 days doing this across Antarctica. He said, minutes felt like, or hours could have felt like minutes when he was so in the zone. He was definitely one that I always say, and kind of probably bored people if they heard that one before. Who else? I was talking offline. I've just interviewed Sheila from Wild Country. If you've seen the Netflix show, haven't released that episode yet. She was a good one to get. She was brilliant.
She was the number one lady for Bhagwan. What was his name? Bhagwan.
Rajneesh
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was his secretary, or kind of like right hand woman, and very interesting lady. Went to jail for 28 months, I think, as a result of some of the stuff that she did in that commune in Oregon. And we talked about leadership. We talked about some of her upbringing and how she had those kind of principles or focus points when she was.
Yeah. I've lost you. Hopefully you'll come back. Now, let's see. I think we need to get this man again. So we just lost Rob for a couple of minutes. Hopefully we'll get him back if he can stay. Yes, we're back.
I don't know. Yeah, I could hear you all along there. So
okay, great. So anyway, you were talking about Sheila.
Yeah, so Sheila was, fascinating. Talked about leadership. Talked about her upbringing. Things that you mightn't have really touched on during the show that she was on Netflix, which was very interesting. So that was really good. And then during season 2, one that jumps out again, going back to kind of mindfulness meditation. I talked to a guy called David G. He has his own kind of meditation practice school. He worked with Deepak Chopra for about 10 years in the Chopra Center, and David G was I think he worked in stock exchanges in New York, kind of real go-getter, hard charger, doing really well. Around the time of the Twin Towers coming down, he had this kind of epiphany as well, saying this is not what I want to do with the rest of my life. He went off to India, spent a long time trying to figure out who he was and do a bit of soul searching there. And then he was getting more and more into that, and then he decided, when he met Deepak Chopra, he worked there and did a lot of the meditation practice, and he was able to combine his passion, which was around meditation, with his skills, which was around finance and corporate setups, which he was able to do for Chopra. So he kind of was able to do a bit of both, and that was very interesting, because I think a lot of the time when a lot of people are looking to make a change and do something totally different, some of the reasons that doesn't work out is because they've gone a complete right angle to what they were good at or what they've experienced in.
This is interesting. So instead of taking his whole life and throwing it in the waste bin, the waste paper basket, he managed to couple it with this kind of new life and use the two of them together, maybe interchangeably or whatever.
Yeah, he was able to use the skills that he had, but in an environment that he believed in. Maybe he had the values were aligned with his own values. He could practice and do all the meditation and mindfulness that he wanted, but still use some of his skills to run budgets, run an organization. And so it was all about values alignment and something he believed in. And I think that's very, very important, that to be passionate about what you do and still earn a living. I guess, if you can find an overlap between those two things.
You still there? Losing you again slightly. Are you back?
Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on there.
I've got you there again, yeah.
Sorry, no, man, I'm not sure why. I don't know. But
are you on wireless, are you? Wireless connection?
No, well, I'm upstairs. Yeah, it's probably wireless upstairs. So,
right, sure. Look, I have you back now, so that's
okay,
good.
Okay.
So, I think you may be right. I know I've experienced it, whereas you're so at odds with maybe the thing that you were doing before, and maybe experience some difficulty in that regard, whatever it is, and you just decide to throw it all out and start something else. And even in doing that, in that transition from one thing to another, there's a huge adjustment that can be quite difficult to kind of deal with,
Yeah, I think so. And again, I would imagine, I haven't done it, so I don't know, but from talking to people that have done it and maybe it didn't work out, they just didn't do enough planning in the background. They didn't try and balance the two worlds for a while to say, this is really what I want, and then take it off. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision. decision maybe, and that impulse, people can be impulsive, and maybe it goes back to learned a lot over the last while from a lot of this, is that the people that are happiest and maybe most successful and are doing well have a very good sense of who they are and what their values are and what makes them tick, and are at peace with that. And I think making decisions then that connect back into those is key,
Yeah, you have a lot of books on your shelf behind you there. What's open on your desk at the minute?
The one I've just finished. So one of my January challenge to myself was to read for 30 minutes every day, and I did that. So that helped me get through a number of books. I'm just hold on, let me see now. What's the one? 1 second. So the one I'm just pretty much finishing up was, I went through a phase last year of buying a bunch of sports psychology. That one okay?
Yeah, go again.
Sports psychology.
Oh yeah.
Can you see it?
Yes, indeed.
Sports psychology, a practical guide, and it's just one I picked up last year. I hadn't got around to reading it, and I suppose doing a bit of coaching and work and kind of coaching teams and focusing on leadership and high performance. Yeah. I wanted to look at some of the tools or techniques that come out of sports psychology to see if there's ones that you could map or align nicely with business and with the corporate world. So again, nice practical handbook, got some kind of PowerPoint slides out of it, some tools that you can test out. That was pretty good. Nearly finished it.
Who's the writer?
The guy that did it, Dr. Arnold Leuns.
Okay.
And I think they do a number of different kind of practical guides for different areas, but nice little book. Earlier in the year, I read, speaking of Deepak Chopra, I read his book called Buddha, which is about Buddha, about Siddhartha, I think, and Gout, I think he's called at different points during the way. Is it like a fictional version of Buddha's story? Quite interesting. Learned a bit about it, but it was one I had for a while, and then actually the last one I mentioned. There's a guy from Cork, Hugh O'Donovan. He used to be in the army for a number of years. He played for Munster in rugby back in the probably 70s, late 80s maybe. Hopefully I'm not doing him a disservice there on his age. But he then moved into lecturing. He's a degree in psychology, and he set up a couple of programs down here, master's courses in kind of meditation and positive psychology. And he wrote a book called Mindful Walking, which is doing quite well. I think he has it out a few years. And I interviewed him there a few weeks ago just about the idea behind mindful walking and how he came up with that and how the writing process went. So they were kind of the main ones I've read so far this year. I don't typically read fiction. I don't get a whole lot out of it. I just kind of like to dive into these other areas. Practical and stuff I can learn from, because it's just hard to switch that always on kind of passion for learning bits and pieces.
Tell me this: if you were 16 again, or if you met your 16-year-old self, what piece of advice, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
I was thinking about that one, and when I was 16, my first choice I suppose I did my Leaving Cert around 16, 17. Psychology was what I wanted to do, number one, and it was in Trinity. It was like 500 and whatever points, and I got my second place choice, which was communications in DCU. If I went back, because I was hell-bent on getting away from home and living this life that I, had that freedom in my life, which I suppose at the time I felt I didn't have. And that was the most important thing of working hard, studying hard, getting a good Leaving Cert and taking whatever came my way, even though what I really wanted to do was psychology. I missed out by about 20 points, still went to DCU, got away, got that whole freedom, dropped out after 3 months in Dublin, and then kind of had a wasted year in a way, and then started in Galway the following September, and was doing a very solid degree in IT, which was grand and it's got me along the way. But my whole journey, I suppose, has got me around to where I probably wanted to be originally.
Yeah.
So my advice back would have been to repeat your leaving cert maybe and just do it again, so that you could actually maybe go down that path. No regrets, like
it's never too late,
I think I'm kind of doing it in lots of ways now because I've done, the diploma in coaching, and a lot of that is performance related, psychology related, and doing the podcasting is like a kind of an on the fly
practical
MBA.
Psychology.
Yeah, exactly. You're learning as you go, and I might have a degree of psychology behind me, but I feel I'm learning a lot from doing it. Maybe one day I would like to do it just to have and go into the more detailed principles of different topics. But at the moment, as I said, I've done the diploma in coaching, and I've qualified as a coach, so I'm kind of touching it, and we'll see. But go back to 16. Maybe just take another year. You don't have to. Your freedom will come. It's not that important. But there was no talking to me at 16.
Yeah,
no.
Sure. There's not who listens at 16 or 17. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Maybe some of us do it to the wrong people. I don't know.
That's it.
If all your most of us work for money to live, and that's our means of exchange. It's a necessary part of life. But if all your financial needs were met, and you didn't need to work for money, what would you do?
I think what I would do, and it would probably be a combination of kind of what I'm doing right now. Like, so the in the day job work, I'm doing project management, and there's an element of people management, and I enjoy getting things done. Those fundamentals or principles are part of who I am. So I'll always have this structured approach to getting stuff done. And so those skills would still be utilized. And then doing more, I suppose, more of the morning and before work and after work activities that we're talking about. Like I don't have any designs or beliefs in that will set up a world recognized podcast and be earning. And I know financial doesn't come into it. It'd be more just throwing yourself into more of these conversations and more time to put them out there, and and just digging into talking to these people that you kind of admire, you have an interest in, and figuring out what they're all about. I think I'd spend a bit more time maybe writing. I'd love to kind of put more time into putting out content that I think with the writing process, what's really good is because it's helping me crystallize a lot of the stuff that's going on in my head.
Does that, yeah.
And then it's kind of, okay, well, that's actually where I'm at this point in time. So that's good. So I'd like to spend a bit more time doing that because there is a lot of stuff that's still knocking around in there. And just keep doing some of this passionate stuff, like if I could do more coaching, helping people, I talk to clients, I do a lot of pro bono stuff in the coaching, and a lot of the challenges they're facing are, confidence or their conflict at work or career changes. And I just have gone through a lot of that, figuring that stuff out myself, and being able to help them kind of get to different places is very, very rewarding. It's just really nice to get sort of satisfaction from knowing you do that. So it'd be a combination of those things. I don't think there's
you there
a bit jack of all, master of none. Sorry, I was just saying, like yourself, we're probably a bit of jack of all trades, master of none, and you like the variety and get your hands dirty in different areas. And I think I'll always like that. I don't think if I had no financial issues, I wouldn't probably buy a bar or a restaurant and just focus everything on that. Spend my days that way. I think it'll just be a mix of all different things.
I think it's valuable. I was only writing about this recently, that we spend some time going broad, but like we were talking about earlier on, picking those 2 hours or 3 hours to go deep, on a particular subject, and spend assigned periods of our day in that kind of mode, you know. So whatever it is, whether it's writing an article or creating a podcast episode or whatever it happens to be, or research or whatever we're doing, I think it's vital, you know. But listen, we're gonna wrap it up now. We're just coming on 40 minutes, and I want to thank you for joining me. Where can people find your stuff and listen to your show?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for the opportunity, Larry. It was good to. I always like when I'm the other side of the mic, I guess, and when I'm listening to guests, stuff that's triggering off. I'm normally taking lots of notes, but then when you're actually talking stuff out yourself, certain things come up. So it's always good to do that. My website is robofthegreen.ie or .com. It'll work on both. Have everything there, so the podcasts are there. The blog posts, and I do a video 1 minute Monday. I do kind of a 1 minute inspirational type thing. I wouldn't say inspirational, maybe I'll take that word back. It's more what's going on in my head at the moment that I'd like to share and see if it resonates with people, and try to do it in a minute, under 2 minutes. It's still 1 minute sort of. So all of this stuff is there. You can email me from there, and then on all the usual platforms of the social media type, at Rob of the Green is pretty much all of them, and then Rob O'Donoghue on LinkedIn. I haven't changed my persona from my real self of that.
Which is your alter ego? Is it this? Is it this one, or is it your professional day job? Who's the alter ego?
I'm spending more time in one or the other at the moment. It's hard to know. It's a sub personality. They're in harmony at the moment, I think.
Oh, excellent! Yeah. Listen, thanks very much, man, for coming on. And we had a conversation a little while ago. And it's about time I returned the compliment. So, I would suggest any of you folks watching or listening later on, check out Rob's podcast. Rob's personality interview style is, I think it's very good, and very good to listen and take on board with some really interesting people Rob's interviewed. So definitely something to check out. Thanks again, Rob, for joining me tonight. So that's it. Thanks for joining me, and thanks very much, Rob, for coming on board. I'll see you later. Have a good weekend. Take it easy.
So, how did you find it? A good show? Hopefully. Do take a second or two to let me know. And before you do dive off, just a couple of quick call-outs. The new podcast, the 864, 15 minutes long, in fact 864 seconds is the aspiration, is now out and ready for listening. Check it out on the site. Go to the podcast page. There's a link for 864 there, or go on to Apple Podcasts and subscribe. That would be awesome. The 864 is all you have to search for. And it's in all other podcast platforms that you can think of or should be. So, have a listen. Every week I release a 1 minute Monday video clip, which is also a tip to hopefully make you 1% better. Check that out. It's on the website on the video page. Did you also know that only about 1% of listeners to podcasts, not just my own but all, leave a rating, leave a review, get in touch or give feedback? And I would love if we could buck that trend and put it to 2% for this one. So please do take the time to give me a bit of feedback, give me some ideas about future guests or whatever the hell comes into mind. Just get in touch or rate or review the podcast on Apple. That helps. I'm available at all of the social platforms, pretty much all, at Rob of the Green. That's either with or without the @ sign, but you'll find it under that moniker, so hopefully I'll hear from you there. Last couple of quick ones. Support. So I do offer some pro bono coaching. Get onto the website, the support page, to get in touch. Few hours a month, happy to do that. And if you would like to support the podcast, that would be awesome. You can do so through Patreon and also through purchasing books through the book page on the website. That goes through Amazon and we get a little percentage. I'm not even sure what, but it's something. And finally, just to say thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast. I know there's lots of other shows out there. It means a lot that you're checking this one out. So have a great rest of day, week, month, year, whatever it may be, and hopefully you're getting 1% better as a result of these shows. Take care and good luck.